Live from the Talking Joe studios, it's Talking Joe.
Talking Joe weekly podcast. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe thought we would last. Talking Joe is there. Find each other like a married couple. Our podcast on the air. Talking Joe is there.
Talking Joe is the code name for a completely untrained special podcast force. Its purpose, to produce a regular comic review show while breaking and replacing a series of presenters from across the world.
Talking Joe. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe. We are on our soapbox. Nobody seems to care. Fighting for fandom wherever there's trouble. The podcast on the air. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe. Talking Joe.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey, it's me, Mark, aka The Funky Bunch, aka The Jingle VIP. So this is episode 110 of Talking Joe, and we may be short of a chief, but I have promoted myself to the captain of the good ship Talking Joe. But I'm not doing it alone, because we have got a new fellow traveller on our voyage. I went a bit more nautical than I expected here, but let's keep it going. Whoa, Nelly. Who's the co-presenter on the show today? We'll find out in just a minute. It's a beautiful day to have a guest. Time to talk to one of the best. Is he broken? Oh, can he be broken? We've had Ben, Chris, and S-Job too. A few episodes in, away they flew. Broken. Oh, so broken. We've always wanted to have a guest just like you, like the Queen will ask, and what do you do? So let's make the most of this communique. Sorry to say, it is for no pay. Hope he's good, but not too good. This I command, Serpentor. Come on, guys, eat mince pies. Let's meet the co-presenter. It's my new co-host. It's Tim Finn.
Hi, Mark. Hi, everyone. I guess you can call me the new anchor. Get it? Nautical?
It's not because you're dropping the W from the normal nickname.
Or I could be the maybe you should be the admiral. Maybe you should be the fleet admiral, and I should be the well, I shouldn't be the captain.
Yeah, I think you're going to get hung up on official titles and ranks here, and I'm going to show up my knowledge or lack of. But I think somewhere along this on this journey that we're on, we'll have to come up with a nickname for you, as is the course for this show. Unless you've got one that is ready, fresh, out of the box, ready to go.
I wish I did. I mean, my name is Timothy, so Tim already is the nickname. But I know you mean a fun or funny nickname, and I don't have that.
Funnier than Timothy.
I think for Googling purposes, we can leave Timothy out of it.
Maybe I'll just refer to you as Timothy when you've been naughty.
Well, there is a Tim Finn. There is a famous musician named Tim Finn, and I when I tell people about Googling me, I say you have to include the word comic or G.I. Joe or animation,
because otherwise it would be a crowded house in those Google search results.
Yeah, I would tear all my hair out and I would just have split ends. Very,
very good. So obviously this isn't your first time on the show. We did a Talking Joe interview with you where we talked about all things Joe, and in specifically your book project. But for those of us who have either got very short memories or haven't listened to that particular episode, why don't you give us the 101 and break it down? Who are you, and what you're up to, and what is your connection to G.I. Joe?
I teach animation history at Lesley University, right outside of Boston, Massachusetts, in the States. I own a comic book store, a brick and mortar shop called Hub Comics. That's also right outside of Boston, a mile outside of Boston. And I am researching and writing the definitive history of the Real American Hero iteration of G.I. Joe. It's called A Real American Book, and this is my 20th year. It's taking a long time because I have those other jobs, but also I'm being thorough, and I have conducted over 270 interviews with toy, comic book, animation, advertising, and film people. And it's a coffee table book, so it's not just quotations from the interviews, it's also images of things you've never seen, like prototypes or office memos or sketches before the final artwork. And since you can't read the book yet because it's not done, you can find me and read all about it and see things that won't fit in the book at my website, arealamericanbook.com. And I'm also at A Real American Book on Instagram and very occasionally Twitter and Facebook.
Very good. And it's going to be a shift to the dynamic of the show, because typically, as little as I know about G.I. Joe, I tend to be more knowledgeable than Chief, whereas I think I'm just going to be left for dust behind your knowledge. So I will try my best to keep up. But speaking of your blog, you've done some pretty cool updates and dropped them in the last week or two over on the blog and also on your Instagram page. So do you want to talk about those a little bit? Because they're pretty cool stuff. There was a Sergeant Slaughter image and also a sort of a Captain America style Joe that was the sort of the pre-production concept art that never made it to a release.
Sure. So the figures at Hasbro, someone like Ron Rudat would sketch a bunch of figures and do all these different versions, and then several other people in R&D, research and design, and also marketing, they'd pin them up on the wall and they'd start to mix and match. Like, okay, use that belt with those knee pads, and then Rudat would draw another one, photocopy them, and do a bunch of different color versions with marker. And then we like this version with the red, but maybe with this blue. And then before the artwork was sculpted, someone outside of Hasbro, like Dave Dorman, who's known for his Star Wars paintings, or George Woodbridge, who's known for his military illustrations and also Mad Magazine, would usually paint, but sometimes draw, a big presentation piece on illustration board. So like 2 feet by 2.5 feet. This is not artwork that we, the consumer, would see. This was not the package painting. That's separate and later. This was just so that R&D and marketing could pitch each character to the vice presidents for final approval, because a marker drawing or a sculpt out of wax that's all one color, or the turnaround, the front, side, back view, sort of wasn't enough in capturing the sort of fantasy and personality of a character. And if you Google, say, Dave Dorman G.I. Joe, you might see some paintings that he did in other categories, but he published some sketchbooks of these specific paintings. So I have a few, and I have photocopies of a few. So occasionally on my blog, I have posted one of these images, and a week or two ago, it was George Woodbridge, his presentation. This one's a drawing, not quite a painting, of version 3 of Sergeant Slaughter, the driver for the Warthog. And they usually have just a little indication of background. They often have the character's name in sort of a stencil. And again, this physical object was brought out in a line review at Hasbro in Pawtucket in Rhode Island. And this was the sort of big visual that would help the higher-ups and the head of the company give a thumbs up or thumbs down to a character. And then this one I blogged about a few years ago, but the Instagram is catching up with the blog. So this one was on my Instagram a week ago. Kurt Groen, who was not the figure designer right after Ron Rudat, but he was the major figure designer after Ron Rudat. He was designing the supplemental line called X Soldiers, which, yes, is supposed to sound like X-Men and X-Force around 94, 93, 94. And this would have been, had the line not been moved from Rhode Island to Cincinnati, from Hasbro to Kenner, right? Had we not lost Real American Hero and gained G.I. Joe Extreme, there was going to be a second line of G.I. Joe superheroes called X Soldiers.
Oh, wow. So this would be like a sub-team like Mega Marines or that kind of thing.
Yes, yes. It is not clear to me how separate the packaging, branding would have been if it would have been, ex-soldiers in giant letters and G.I. Joe in very small letters, or if it would have been, G.I. Joe, ex-soldiers. And so this character, he basically looks like sort of halfway between Captain America and the Rob Liefeld redesign of Fighting American, which is to say Captain America in white. And this guy, he's got the sort of headgear that Gambit or Hawk version 3 has. He has a round shield. He's in red, white, and blue. He's got big muscles. He's got shoulder pads. And this illustration, it's on a big piece of black illustration board. There was going to be a guy who looks a little bit like Spawn. There was going to be a guy who looks a little bit like a Sorayama painting, who's all chrome, sort of a smooth, like Silver Surfer type on rollerblades. There was going to be a villain, sort of in a like a Rocky villain with like a hood who had, I don't know, smoke or lava coming out of his shoulders. Definitely aiming at the crowd who were watching the X-Men cartoon in '95, reading X-Men comics and buying the Toy Biz X-Men toys. Something that I may not ever post on the blog because it's going to be a photograph in my book is I have the prototype of the figure, the mock-up, which is one of the Kenner animated Batman figures with his bat ears sanded off. But you can tell from the smoothness of the character that that's where it's from. And he's been painted in red, white, and blue. And he's got, some custom hair because this guy's a blonde, the way that, Gambit and Hawk have their hair spilling out of their headgear.
Yeah.
So the point of the blog is to show you things that either won't fit in the book because my collection and research spread out further than a finite book, or to tease things that'll be in the book.
Yeah, this guy's wild. He's like, Captain America extreme to the max, cowabunga. He's got crazy American flag shoulder pads and stuff. It is right out of an Image, one of the Image kind of superhero team books of the 90s, isn't it? Or even Marvel, where they were doing some quite out there designs with, for example, their Thor and stuff. So yeah, very interesting to see. And is the some of those designs that you're just talking about this sub team, are they all under wraps, or is this stuff that is publicly known and out there on the interwebs already?
Let's see. So Joe Declassified, I think in one of their PDF issues, has reproduced small reproductions of some of these, and I think Dan Klingensmith in his Creating G.I. Joe book series, I think he has shown a few. I have high quality scans of all of them because I have them.
Very good. Cool. And what else is happening in the world? So I know, well, I've heard from, Pathé News or whatever the sources we get over here in Blighty, that there's lots of snow going on in America. Has the snow hit you? I heard it was gonna hit Boston in a big way.
We had some 5 days ago, and we're getting some tonight or tomorrow. But fingers crossed, it's been a mild winter so far in terms of temperature and snowfall.
Okay, so it's not hit as big as they were fearing it might.
You just have like 385 days of rain every year, right?
385, yeah, it feels like it.
I've been to London 2 or 3 times, and it's just never sunny and gorgeous. It's just always, I just always feel sad.
Yeah, you ready to talk some comics?
I'm always ready to talk some comics.
Good stuff. Let's do it.
Comic talk, oh, comic talk. Larry Hammer writes them, Tim and Mark discuss them, whoa. Comic talk, oh, comic talk. Larry Hammer writes them, Tim and Mark discuss them, whoa.
So today we are going to be we're going to be cleansing our palate of Snake Hunt, because we've spent the last, I think, 4 episodes, me and Chief, talking about Snake Hunt, and unfortunately I think Snake Hunt broke Chief, so it's good to get past that and get onto something that I think we can find a bit more inclusion about people enjoying. But let's move on to G.I. Joe issue 276, which is the first part of the Untold Tales. Maybe arc isn't the right word, but a few issues, which are essentially one and dones in between the main story continuing. Creative team. We have got Larry Hammer, as always, on the words. Nitho Diaz is the artist. Inks, Jagdish Kumar. Colors, Jay Brown, as always. Letters, Neil Utake. And from editorial, senior editor, Tom Waltz. Editor, Megan Brown. And Diana Davis continues her credited role as research assistant. So let's look at the covers. So you've got all three covers actually in front of you in person. Is that right?
Yes, with three of my fingers, I'm touching all of them at this moment.
Okay, let's have a look through them. And is we started this chat off the air, but would you typically buy the variant covers or own the variant covers?
I have strong feelings about variant covers. Unfortunately, all of the publishers have backed themselves into a short-sighted corner where they need variant covers to publish, to survive. Some publishers are particularly egregious at this, and other publishers are just worryingly annoying at this. It's basic math. If you're going to sell 3,000 copies of a comic and you're not going to make enough money, and for very little money you can hire one artist to draw an additional image. The way that printing works now, it's very easy to print the guts of the comic, to change a few things, and to print a different cover and to connect that. And then all of a sudden your orders go up by 1,000 or 2,000. Maybe they double. Maybe it's a special issue, a first issue, fancy artist. They double or triple. Suddenly you're not just making money, you're making a lot of money. I don't like that because I'm less interested in comic books as objects and much more interested in them as stories. I certainly want beautiful objects in boxes and on my shelves, but I'm not interested in variant covers. Also, artistically, if we think back to something like G.I. Joe #1 in 1982, or Action Comics #1 in 1938, first appearance of Superman, these images are iconic. If they had at the time been published with 2 or 3 variants and then 3 or 5 or 20 retailer variants, any one of those images would sort of be reproduced less and would over time accumulate less power and would not attain iconic status. So when I think back to issue 220 of G.I. Joe, it takes me a moment to remember what the cover is, because there were 5 of them or 3 of them. So as a reader and as a retailer, I do not pay attention to or order variant covers. The 2 exceptions are IDW Transformers and IDW G.I. Joe, because I am voting with my dollars and I want these books to stick around. I very much want G.I. Joe to stick around. In the final year of the Marvel run, I started buying 2 copies of every issue.
Oh, wow.
Because I thought, if everyone did that, the book would continue indefinitely.
I don't know if everyone else got the memo.
I did not tell anyone else, but I should have. And ordering the variants for G.I. Joe. Anyway, so yes, I have cover A, cover B, and the retailer incentive cover in front of me.
And did you say as a retailer, do you tend to shun the variant, or is it part of your sort of bread and butter, really, of that you do have to get them in and play the game?
We don't play the game, and our customers don't ask. We're not that kind of store. There are stores where, I know a retailer in California who has a store that's across the street from a middle school and down the street from, I think, a high school. And he sells a lot of Batman, like the new issue of Batman every month. And I like Batman, and I want to read the new issue of Batman. We don't sell a lot of Batman at my store, but we do sell a lot of, like the new Jaime Hernandez Love and Rockets graphic novel.
A slightly more discerning customer. highbrow tastes.
I don't want to use either of those words, but we're in a college town. We do have kids. We do have superhero readers. We have fanboy readers. I count myself as a fanboy. I go to the websites every day. I'm reading X-Men, but I don't want to worry about that stuff because it takes a lot of energy to sort through. So, if every publisher publishes 2 of the same thing, it's twice as much work for my manager and I to place an order. And then a month later, someone says, "Oh, I need this issue of Ninja Turtles. Can you get me the B cover?" And let's say the B cover is now sold out, but we can still order the A cover. So now we have to deliver some bad news to our customer, and they have to make a judgment call. Maybe they're not going to buy it at all, although the comic is still available. Don't you want to read the story? Like, well, but I wanted the Sophie Campbell cover, not the Eastman cover, not the Campbell cover.
But yeah, I'm pretty much on the same page. Apart from I do not buy the buy the variants, but as a general principle, I don't know that I have ever bought a variant cover. Certainly, if I have, it wouldn't be more than the number of fingers on a hand. And actually, the variant covers for me have essentially driven me away from buying floppy comics, even to the degree of me thinking, should I stop buying G.I. Joe as a monthly comic? Because when you buy the trade, they stick in all of the variants as extras in the back of the book. So it then doesn't become a choice of which one do you lose out as a physical, object in your collection. So yeah, I am not really a fan of the variant, and particularly in terms of how you have to make a choice of which one you get. And I don't actually make the choice. I just typically will get whichever has been stuck into my pull box, which is generally the cover A. So I'm appreciative when, for example, in the back of the IDW book, they'll say next issue and have the big full page of the variant, because then I'll at least have it in my collection somewhere without having to buy it as a separate cover.
Mark, you should definitely not stop buying the monthly G.I. Joe comic in favor of the collections. Probably you should do both.
Yeah, no, I'll bind it, and maybe stick it in as an extra in the back of the bind or something along those lines. But there we go. That's the rant on the vision of covers as a whole. What is the actual covers looking like? So the cover A is Nitho Diaz. It's got the heroes of the issue apparently smashing through a window and tearing in through some curtains or something. We've got Snake Eyes, aka Fake Eyes, aka Throwdown, aka Sean. Good grief, we don't. It's the real Snake Eyes, aka the Silent Master, aka file name unknown. Snake, along with Scarlet and Torpedo and Stalker. So some of Larry's very favourite characters making their way into this issue and onto the cover. It's a dynamic image from Nitho. The colouring is looking quite muddy, unfortunately, which I think is letting it down somewhat.
Yeah, this was actually my first comment. The colors are by Tom B. Long, whose name we see in a few IDW books. And I could be wrong here. I sort of thought he was a letterer, but
oh wow.
But in either case, he's not someone who has colored G.I. Joe much, if ever. And the first time I saw this image several months ago online, the first thing I thought was, oh, too much K. And in printing, there are 4 colors of ink, right? There's cyan, there's yellow, there's magenta, and there's black. Black is called so CMYK. Black is called K because it's the key plate in printing. And in Photoshop, when you color, if you use a lot of black, if you mix a lot of K into your colors, they get dark, but they also can get muddy. And the fact that this shows up both on my screen when it's going to be an RGB file, right, and also CMYK as a physical object on paper, as a hard copy quote file, it's too dark in both of those. And if you squint, Snake Eyes and the background and Scarlet sort of become one big shape, and all the detail in Stalker's arms sort of drops out. So this is, I think, Diaz's artwork benefits from less color. And an example of this is his cover to the upcoming reprint of Yearbook #1, where he's kind of redrawing the Michael Golden cover to Yearbook #1. And Diaz, I think on purpose, draws it with less detail because it's a, quote, retro image, or because he's sort of aping Michael Golden's, quote, animated style. And the colors, so there's less very small line hatching detail in that image. And the colors are closer to flat. And that image pops really nicely.
Yeah.
This image on G.I. Joe 276, right? There's a ton of broken glass on the left, and there's all this smoke on the bottom right, and the smoke is made up of 3 or 4 colors, and then the black lines of the smoke have been dropped out as light blue.
Yeah.
It's quite busy, and I think it wants a lighter touch.
Yeah, and I called it up on my screen as well to see how it looked on a monitor rather than as a physical object, and it does actually look quite a lot lighter, particularly Snake Eyes. There's a lot more grey and blue rather than the sort of the muddier black and very dark blue. So I do wonder whether there has been a bit of an issue with reproduction, that the printed image hasn't quite come out the way that the colorist had intended. Actually, Torpedo's face there as well. He's looking it's kind of a quite dark, sort of just pinky on the printed image, and on my screen it is looking more like a skin tone. So yeah, I do wonder whether there is something about that going on this one particularly.
I want to state that Diaz can sure draw the hell out of everything, which I really appreciate. And in the G.I. Joe comic, we've had different sort of eras of style, and it's not as simple as more detail and less detail, but without getting into it, we could say more detail, less detail. And Diaz, his poses are dynamic, his expressions are evocative, and he has a lot of detail. And it's really exciting because oftentimes G.I. Joe has not looked like sort of the hot Marvel book, or nowadays the hot slick DC book. And with under Diaz's hand, it does, which is really exciting. And there's some traditionalists who want it to look much more like, say, Ron Wagner, and I totally dig that. I think where Diaz, again, let's say comparing it to his cover for the upcoming Yearbook #1 reprint, just to the right of Stalker's eye are some leaves. Because I think in this little bit of space between Stalker and Torpedo, there's like a potted plant, and great, we don't need that. And then just under Torpedo's left bicep is a round shape, and I can't tell what it is.
I'm guessing a vase or something.
So I understand that they're breaking into some kind of room. It's a fancy room in a mansion, or it's an art gallery. Can't quite tell, or a museum. I understand that there should be things besides just like rectangles on the wall for framed artwork or mirrors or windows. But, again, sometimes less is more.
Yeah, good spot.
Less is more actually is a nice transition to Brian Shearer's cover for cover B. Shearer draws in something, I think some people would call it more of a, quote, animated style, where he's drawing less detail, and he's trading more in the larger forms of muscle mass and like the larger shapes of a vehicle or like a tree. He also colors it, and he uses a muted palette, which comes across really nicely. Except for a little bit of this yellow behind the characters on the horizon. Nothing's bright in this cover, not even the whites of their eyes, not even the metallic of the sword or the throwing stars on Scarlet's arm. Shearer also does something which I really appreciate in all comics art. He very, very, very slightly cartoons his characters, right? So Scarlet's eyes are a little bit bigger than realistic to make them more evocative. Stalker's eyes are a little smaller. Stalker and Torpedo have different actual facial structures, differently shaped eyes, nose, mouth. And And then we have this sort of bold compositional device where something is in the extreme foreground, right? These two hands up on the top.
In
and
cuffs, yeah.
Yes, and they're knocked out in dark blue so they don't distract too much. You sort of don't see them until you notice them.
Yeah.
Brian Shearer, I don't know if he I don't know if the artist Rick Burchett with a B, Rick Burchett, who's best known for a lot of the quote animated Batman comics.
Yeah, sure.
Both penciling, inking, and also inking others. I don't know if Shearer thinks of Burchett as someone whose style he looks to, but I feel like they're in a similar category. And that feels old school, where a lot of the sort of open sections of like shirt or pants are left to the colorist to sort of fill in, and there's less work done with like lots of inking or lots of hatching.
I get it. I'm not necessarily such a fan of this one, but I do get all the points that you're saying. I'm not sure I like the bunching of the lines around Scarlett's crotch there. I'm not. I think the visor angle on Snake Eyes is a little bit wonky, but yeah, it's not bad all in. Then we've got John Royal continuing his long run as a variant artist on G.I. Joe with an image of Torpedo in the water, flanked by Snake Eyes and Scarlett, with sort of rainy, choppy water and parachutes sort of descending behind them, and colours by one of his frequent collaborators, James Offendy. Again, quite a lot of heavy lifting done often by John's colorist.
James Offrady, if I can correct it.
Offrady, yes, I'm Offrady. I pronounced that wrong.
So I'm always a little, not to push anyone out who's already drawing an issue, but after the G.I. Joe Danger Girl crossover miniseries, I so want to see John Royal just draw an issue of G.I. Joe. And
yeah.
There are plenty of artists, you make more money if you draw covers, right? Covers pay better than pages. Covers are, I don't want to say easier to draw than pages, because it's a different battle, but they can be quicker. And certainly they're sexier and you get more attention for them. Like John Royal has established he can draw interiors, and he can draw G.I. Joe interiors. I would love to see him draw a full issue of G.I. Joe. I like, separate from how clearly his work looks like J. Scott Campbell, and separate from how his work for G.I. Joe seems to refer to the cartoon as much as it does the toy or the comic, I always appreciate with his covers how animated they are, how there's so much kinetic and potential energy in these poses, in like flame and explosions and bullets hitting the ground and wind and rain. It's all very, very energetic.
Yeah.
Like he's not drawing a lot of calm moments, even when it's just like the Baroness and Destro in a cool badass pose. It's very, even though they're not really moving, they're not lunging, there's a lot of snap. And I don't know that we've ever seen Torpedo in such a badass pose.
Indeed, yeah.
Like a Navy SEAL, like they're the best of the best, and they can physically do things that the rest of us can't. And it's really cool. Like he's coming at us, he's ready. Like the moving through this water isn't going to be easy because it's waist deep. It's nighttime. It's a storm, and then he's got two of the best Joes behind him. This is one of those covers where, very briefly, when I was a kid, I would be disappointed when the cover of G.I. Joe was an exaggeration of the inside, and sort of that scene didn't really happen. But I understand that's the point of a cover, right? It asks a question and the inside answers it, or it teases you to get you to buy it. This image right here, I would happily read the issue.
It's something that me and Chief have discussed quite frequently of looking at the John Royal covers, because while this one does have the three characters that are on the cover do feature in the story. They don't have a parachute drop into water. And so it is clearly not the story that's happening in the interiors. But yeah, we frequently have discussed where you have the random covers of, for example, Snowjob being chased by some foes on his battle bear or whatever, that you think, crikey, that looks like being chucked into the middle of quite of an exciting and interesting story. Can we maybe have that one? So he is very good at sort of conjuring up the idea that you're being kind of dropped into the middle of quite an exciting story.
So the colors on this John Royal cover by James Afraidy, they are a kind of exaggeration, right? Because this is like midnight or 2 a.m. on the beach, and there are no stars out and the moon is not out. So it actually wouldn't be this bright. This scene is lit almost as if there's like lightning that we can't see, kind of nearby.
Yeah, there's a
right?
sort of a halo of light sort of creating a border all around Torpedo on the image, right?
And all the characters have highlights, not just that halo, but they have highlights on their tops and slightly darker tones sort of on their bottoms. And then the water right around Torpedo, that's not just like white foam because he's moving, that's like specifically illuminated. And this, I think, is a really good use of active, busy, right? What if I was to frown, it's like too much color, it's too active, but I think it really works here. I don't necessarily want this cover to be sort of much more muted and much darker. I think the color agrees with the sort of potential for violence, right? It's like they're coming to get you, bad guy.
And then beyond that, we've got some we've got some further exclusive variants. We've got 616 Comics and Simpleman Comics exclusive variant A and B. And I looked these up, and they are Cobra Forever covers from artist Hal Laren, and they are a homage to the Wu-Tang Clan album Wu-Tang Forever, and it was an exclusive to the 616comics.com. The cover A was limited to 1,000 copies and priced at $14.99. I mean, limited to 1,000. Given the print run on this book, that's not that limited, is it? And cover B, the Cobra desktop, was limited to 500 comics and a steal at $19.99. And if you wanted the two, you could pay $29.99. So 1 cent back off of your 30.
I think generally the cover should agree with the interior. And I have felt this way all along, before the variant era, and particularly during the last 30 issues of G.I. Joe. If, like it's an Arctic issue on the inside and John Royal draws like Zorana or whatever on the cover, that's fun. I think that's confusing, right? And like, if I go to the store and I buy a Star Trek The Original Series DVD and it's got Captain Picard on it, right? Like, I only in the crazy collector mentality of comic books would this be okay. Like, if I go to a toy store or my local collectible shop and there's like a McFarlane Toys Spawn action figure, and the art on the side is of like Sam Keith's The Max, and it's like, oh, that's a variant. It's like, no, that's a mistake. That's confusing. So I think this Hal Laren cover could work great for an issue that's about Cobra. I also think that the trend of cover homages to like the John Byrne X-Men Days of Future Past composition, or like the Joe Shuster Action Comics #1, Superman like throwing the car, or album covers. Sorry, it's just silly. like G.I. Joe doesn't really have anything to do with Wu-Tang Clan. Yeah. So I don't know what that, it's like, once you start down this path, anything is fair game. It's cool. Why not do a Charles Schultz Peanuts pastiche and redraw a Sunday like Charlie Brown and Snoopy strip with G.I. Joe characters? It's like, well,
sounds good. I'm on board.
Well, that's fun as fan art on the internet. It's like, oh, look at this thing that my friend did. But like, on an official comic book, like, I don't
Yeah,
see it.
I think they had a very exhaustive and detailed thought process, which was that, oh, Marvel did some hip hop covers, didn't they? Yeah, let's do that. But anyway, so let's move on to what's happening. So I'll give a plot breakdown. In a flashback story, Scarlet, Snake Eyes, Torpedo, and Stalker are dropped into Trucial Abysmia to capture a bad guy, Alpheus Huntzucker. The Joes meet their contacts, two female resistance fighters named Aman and Zara. The Joes split into two groups, the Snatch team, who sneak into the compound via the sewer, and the support team, who go through the main gate in a captured BTR vehicle. They locate Huntzucker, and after a skirmish, the cornered villain pulls the pin on a grenade, intending to not go out alone. Zara tackles him and they fall off the scaffolding to an explosive death. There we go. That's the issue in a nutshell. So, I think this issue had an interesting kind of context in where G.I. Joe was. So it's coming straight after Snake Hunt. And we're going into these untold tales. So generally sort of looking back at a point in the previous untold history of G.I. Joe. We've got a few issues of this to come, and I think what was done in part here was probably a palate cleanser for Larry to go back to an era of G.I. Joe that he was very comfortable with, and telling some stories from the past that he had some enthusiasm for. But I think it was also acting as a buffer. So allowing some stories to be built up prior to the ongoing continuity continuing with the new art team, who I believe is Andrew Griffiths, if I'm remembering correctly. And the timing of how this was done was quite interesting as well, that the scripts for 275, 276 and 277, I think, were written almost simultaneously and given to the artist to complete. So Nitho Diaz had completed this issue prior to moving on to help out Robert Aitkins finish up the final part of Snake Hunt in 275. And Brian Shearer was well on the way to completing 277 as well simultaneously before we then... then there's a couple more issues to go in this Untold Tales theme before the story proper starts up again in Murder by Assassination, which is in 281. So we've got 276, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's 5 issues of Untold Tales before the main plot starts up again. Some of the things that struck me about the issue were the not so subtle ending. So we got Scarlet asking Snake Eyes to promise that if something like that happens again with the grenade, that he won't do what Zara did. So that's a quite on the nose, not so subtle premonition for Snake Eyes' eventual death in issue 273, where Zara and the Doctor go out exactly like Snake Eyes and Serpentor. So some foreshadowing after the fact happening there.
Sorry, did you just say 273? Did you mean, is it 217?
You may have heard me say 273, but I'm certain that I said 213 because, as we know, nothing is ever wrong in the world of G.I. Joe. And did you spot the really super subtle detail that does point us towards issue 213 in the art?
I did not, unless you mean, is it the composition on the second to last page?
It's the very last page, the very last panel. In Snake Eyes' visor, just as Scarlet's talking to him about what had just happened, she says, "Snake Eyes, promise me if something like that happens to me again, you won't do what Zara did." Last panel, "Promise me." And just to the right of that bubble, a reflection or sort of lighting effect in Snake Eyes' visor makes out the numbers 213.
Oh, wow. Huh.
Subtle, eh?
Good job. Good job. No, I think it was subtle because I didn't see it.
I wouldn't blame you. I don't think I would have spotted that too, unless I had been doing some research and looking what people were saying about this issue. Yeah, that's right. That's super subtle, but yeah, very clever, I think, and nicely done by Diaz. That it is just playing as the lighting in the visor and it not being so on the nose that it's jarring and going, oh right, okay, they've just written the number 213 on the visor. Did you have any particular thoughts on the issue? Anything that stood out for you?
Yeah, I love this kind of GI Joe story.
Mm.
Whether it's a flashback or not, whether we get to see the original Snake Eyes or not, I think Hama is a great writer when he's limited to 20 or 22 pages.
Yeah. He's keeping ultra focused.
I mean, my Desert Island comic series is actually G.I. Joe Special Missions, not G.I. Joe.
Interesting.
Because freed from the ongoing soap opera, right? And without having to always think about Cobra, Special Missions has a flexibility, right? In terms of who the bad guys are, and certainly what good guys get used, right? Because the book's so crowded. But I mean, it's not just Hama. I think most writers in comics, I think all writers in comics should have to write a bunch of 8-page stories. And 20 or 22-page stories, and learn the craft of the short story. And the editorial push around 2000, 2005 to, quote, write for the trade, to write longer stories where maybe you've got a cliffhanger every 20 pages. As long as it's 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 issue arcs, right? We're just going to make a book, and who cares how satisfying any one chapter is. I think Larry can write really satisfying single chapters when the chapter is all there is. I think this goes back to 86, 87 with Special Missions. This goes to the previous run of self-contained issues with IDW. This even goes with the Hasbro pack-in comics that he was writing around it was 2000, I forget, 6. And some of those are like weird because it's like Falcon and Nemesis Enforcer, right?
Nemesis Enforcer, yeah.
So I'm always up for this. This could happen. This doesn't need to happen after a 10-chapter multi-part story, and I would certainly be happy if this was just an ongoing spin-off.
Indeed, yeah, and it's actually much like the Special Missions that happened before. It's the Joes going up against a villain that is non-Cobra related. So actually, in the Stalker Special Missions, again, they were going up against some terrorists there that I think were nothing to do with Cobra at all. So I think Larry does seem to enjoy that dynamic of it being having Joes or having Cobras, but not necessarily having them up against each other. So in this one, it's a diabolical mad scientist who's trying to do his thing, and they're out to get him, and it's not that typical Cobra has to be in there somewhere.
The other sort of larger idea that struck me here is that Hama is once again placing this story in the context of the real world. Right? I don't know my geography and my geopolitics well enough to sort of call out exactly who Hanzucker is in the real world, right? But there's this line on page 7. Hanzucker spearheaded the regime's poison gas program, supplying them with the means to wipe out whole villages of ethnic minorities, right? Even if you don't know history and you're not following the news, that rhymes, right? Like Saddam Hussein gassed his own people. And then that you have these freedom fighters in the form of Aman and Zara, and you have sort of an American insertion team going into to help. G.I. Joe is a lot of, there is fantasy, there is sci-fi, there is not quite superhero, but G.I. Joe is a lot of things. But I think a lot of us respond to where it's grounded, and a lot of the grounding is Hama reading the news, reading books, and it's not quite like torn from the headlines, but these are realistic characters in realistic settings. And, there are parts of the world where there are bad scientists and bad political leaders who are invading and harming their own people.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess the state of the world being it is, you probably don't have to hone in on one particular country for it to be the the bad one that Larry Hammer's being inspired by. But
right, and then
maybe Syria is could be one of them, but it could be any number of real world countries.
But because it's G.I. Joe, it's one of the
exactly.
fictional countries.
But what's something that did strike me was that there wasn't necessarily anything that explicitly states the timeline of the story too much. We've got Scoop in the story, and it refers to him having proven himself in a very hairy mission into Sierra Gordo. So that would seem to be a reference to Special Missions 23 from July 1989. But apart from that, there isn't anything too much that dates it per se. So, and also, I'm not too sure that there's anything that necessarily places it as being that it needs to be Snake Eyes rather than the Shawn Snake Eyes throwdown. That I don't know that there's any reason that this story would necessarily be told that differently, were it to be Throwdown rather than Snake Eyes, other than obviously the payoff being that Scarlet is kind of having a premonition of telling Snake Eyes that if he's ever in a situation where he's got a bad guy with a hand grenade, that he doesn't throw himself to his death.
The other sort of overall thing that hit me is that this is a story with Scoop in it, and we don't see him very often, and he probably gets a bad rap. He's probably a lot of people's not favorite character, and I have a lot of affinity for him for several reasons. I think Hama uses him well. It does appear that Diaz is drawing the version 2 toy costume rather than the version 1, because the original toy and his appearance in the Deke episodes, Scoop is wearing a green vest with yellow sleeves, and in the newer version of the toy, he's very much wearing like a yellow shirt or jacket with a much smaller green like clip-on vest plate, and it's a very small thing. I think where artists have modernized, I don't know if it's an IDW decision or a Hasbro directive, but Scarlett's wearing pants now. She's no longer wearing a bathing suit jumpsuit, and I think I think that's the right thing to do, because the version of Scarlett from 1982, that's very Star Wars and James Bond. Scarlett should be wearing pants. Sure. And so you slightly adapt sort of the color scheme so that she's wearing pants, right? Great. And I know that artists sometimes sort of nowadays are loading up the Joes with more gear, because modern soldiers have a lot more gear than like the 1982, lineup of the Joes, who are, just have like, a shoulder strap and a grenade.
Yeah. I get the appeal for the artists to go for the more modern designs and those subtle changes, because they do typically look like they're more grounded in real life, that where they've got a difference in their color of their top, it will look like it's a vest or a flat jacket or whatever, that, or something tactical, that it does seem often, it does kind of look a little bit more grounded in the kind of gear that someone might actually wear with some extra like webbing detailing and that kind of thing. So I get where an artist is drawn to drawing more detail, that they'll go for those kind of looks.
But I want these artists to not sort of run out of time at the end of the month drawing an issue. Like, I don't want the final pages to have less detail because they've run out of time. I don't want them to have to skip an issue. So I am always fine with artists drawing a little less than a little more. So the simpler versions of the costumes are okay with me. What I was going to also say about Scoop is that that he's not so much a combat character, right? Like, you think of his toy, it's like, well, he comes with this silly backpack and this giant video camera. And, and he's bright yellow and bright green, right? Like he's not
It's
he's
perfect
not
for a
cool.
it's perfect for a night insursion, isn't it? The
Well,
bright
I mean,
yellow.
but again, like Gung Ho shouldn't be in an Arctic mission, right? Like so that ship has sailed. Like we just have to accept all of it. Because all of them would put on black clothing and like black face paint and black hats, all of them would look like Torpedo on the cover of the variant, right, where they're all wearing wetsuits. But what I like here is that Scoop has this line which he goes back to, like, nobody wants me to do my job. There is, which is sort of the meta admission that this is not a cool character who didn't come with lots of awesome guns, and that he's sort of saddled with this more technical role, right? He's got a camera, he should be videotaping things, right? So that it's not a nod to the fans and collectors, but it ends up being one. But what's really happening here is that Hama gets to create a tension between Scoop, who wants to do his job as a combat videographer, and Zara, Aman and Zara, right? So you with the camera, no pictures, not while we are unmasked. They will take action against our families if we are identified, right?
Yeah.
That's a really powerful line, which creates tension and conflict, right? So it's not just like, ha ha ha, Scoop's a loser. It's like, oh no, actually, as a reader, I'm invested. Well, how is Scoop going to do his job, or is he going to make a compromise with these two people they meet on the mission? Is he going to get in trouble? Or is one of them going to shoot his camera? Are they going to get into a fight? That's really interesting to me, and it's that kind of small tension that Hama will often seed throughout his stories, which keeps these stories from being easy, right? And then it happens. There's another one of them. Where is it? Hold on, I'm looking at my notes. When Scarlet refers to, she says she refers to the records division, the fire in the records division in Fort Leonard in the 1970s, right? Like, this is totally fascinating, right? This fire in 1973 burned out of control for 22 hours. And the story of how a bunch of employees in the days afterwards saved all of these waterlogged documents, right? These are documents on the discharge and service records of various Air Force personnel. And so I'm looking on the National Archives, and staffers from this office initially took all of these water damaged records in plastic milk crates to a temporary facility where drying racks were assembled as spare shelving. And then someone figured out that McDonnell Douglas had a factory nearby which had vacuum drying facilities.
Oh wow!
And so they heated this room and they changed the pressure so the water got sucked out, and they saved all this paperwork. And then one last point, the investigation of the cause of the fire, which started on the 6th floor of this building, is undetermined. Yeah. And so to read it in Scarlett's view, it's like, well, that's a convenient fire.
Exactly.
Like, oh, your videotapes, one person's going to see them at the Pentagon. Like, our mission will or will not have been seen as helpful or important. Like, we're just doing the job, and the videotape's never going to be seen anyway, and it might be destroyed, right? That is a pessimism which shows up in G.I. Joe stories now and then, which I think is the response to anyone who sort of, not a fan, assumes that it's all like silly, patriotic, super heroic, like dumb action comics. It's like, no, there's pathos.
Yeah, it's the nice touch as well of sort of digging into those little historical nuggets, like the records fire that is clearly quite a significant event. It destroyed 17 million official military personnel files, and it sounds like it's kind of one of the go-to sort of things where, because of just the sheer size of it, there's a whole bunch of information that was lost and will never be got come back. But it's those little nuggets of just throwing it into the story, into the conversations, and sort of just making it sort of feel so much more grounded that these are real world military people on their missions, and of course they know this stuff. But you can only know it if the writer knows it too.
Yeah, Andrew Franks, who's one of the principals at Boss Fight Studios, which makes action figures, and Andrew's a GI Joe fan and designer. He worked for Hasbro. Andrew made the point to me, and I think of this every month when I read GI Joe, and I'll probably say it every time we do an episode. One of the reasons to read the GI Joe comic is because there is no comic like it on the newsstands. And I don't mean, oh, it's long running, it's up to issue 200 something, it hasn't started over at number 1. And I don't mean, oh, the same guy's written it all this time. And I don't mean, oh, it started and ran for a long time, and then it came back and has run for a long time. What I mean, and I don't mean, oh, it's based on a toy, but it's got like 2 or 3 generations of fans, kids and older folks, right? All those things are true and are noteworthy. What I mean is, it's a team book, but again, it's not just one team, it's a good guy team and a bad guy team. But then there's the secondary population, the vehicles, and then there's this added layer of, quote, realism, right? Or grounded, right? There's planes and there's war. And then you have this writer who's working hard to, like we just mentioned, seed some small historical and geopolitical notes into this just action comic that's ostensibly for kids, right? And then these artists who are working really hard to keep up with all of this reference. And the best X-Men stories, the worst X-Men stories, the best Punisher, the worst Punisher stories, none of them quite read like G.I. Joe. Any era, like Special Missions or the Marvel run or the IDW run. And even when an issue is not my favorite or less satisfying, I tell myself there is no other comic like this being published.
It's true. There's nothing quite like it, and it's I think that's the reason that it's sort of resonated with so many to the degree it has, and it's essentially the only comic that I feel like I absolutely have to have as a single issue still, because of that. I think just the specialness of all of those elements coming together. Anything else we spotted? I saw on the discussion there was a few people that commented on Torpedo that it's funny that he's in his scuba gear. Sort of it. I mean, it does look a lot like his version 1 uniform without the mask, but I'm giving that a pass. I think I can rationalize that as being a sneaky suit mission outfit that he wears that looks a lot like his scuba gear, but is just it's just his military sneaky togs, much like Snake Eyes' costume would be, and it's not a wetsuit.
So out of the water, Torpedo would look like Muskrat, and in season 2 of the TV show, wetsuit. I think it's a Ninja Holiday. Wetsuit's out of his wetsuit because he's like out of the water, and he's just wearing pants and a button-up shirt, and it's disappointing. Mm-hmm. And like I said before, Gung Ho would not be on Arctic missions. Like Gung Ho would be dressed up like all the Arctic guys. He'd have white pants and a giant white coat and a giant white hat, and I don't want to see that. There is power in these iconic designs. And for that power to be maintained, the characters should be relatively consistently presented. So, like Batman isn't actually realistic, right? Like all the great pains that Batman Begins took to explain how this guy would work, like a grappling hook and a car and like fear and smoke, and he trained with this like mystical ninja guy. Like, no, like your third day you'd break your ankle and then you couldn't do it for 3 weeks or 3 months, right? So like I'm sorry, we have to give all of this a pass. Like, I just want to see Torpedo in his wetsuit, whether it's actually drawn like a thick wetsuit that's insulated, or whether it's drawn more like Snake Eyes' sneaky suit. I don't want to see Torpedo in like dressed up like Grunt.
Sure, yeah, and I think in previous issues, Torpedo has been shown in the sort of, like you say, muskrat type gear. So, but yeah, in the last few times that he's appeared, he has been in his wetsuit look style. So in Silent Option and in Snake Hunt, he was in this sort of similar look.
Right.
So yeah, so I guess they're porting back that look into this story
Superman
set in the past.
Superman has red underwear on the outside because his costume is supposed to look like a circus strongman, because that's what the character is referring to visually in 1938. And 75 years later, when they take away the red underwear, logically, in the movie and in the comics, logically it makes sense. He wouldn't wear that. But from a costume design perspective, the costume is now out of balance. There's too much blue.
Yeah.
And you need that red in the middle to break it up. And the G.I. Joe designs, sort of on the whole, like as a grouping, they're perfect. And you don't really need to mess with them.
Yeah, at least he's not wearing his flippers, unlike his early appearance when he was what was it called? The Fort Knox, I think it was. That they were at when he appeared in full flippers as well. Let's move on. We've got more strong female characters. So 2 strong female characters here in a lead role, and I think it's clearly something that Larry's embracing. We've had Layla the Scavenger in Snake in the Grass not too long ago. We had Katya, the Darklonian Resistance leader, and he's sort of really been embracing those characters like Bomb Strike and Helix and Jinx, Granny, Dawn, Laura. I could go on, but we've got another strong female who is not incapable of taking down entire squads of the baddies with her special military knife, which is another Larryism there. We've got a shout out to her blade. Let me find it. Her knife is not a Spetsnaz.
Hold on,
That's what I said. Spetsnaz.
What page you on?
It's the one where they're in the drainage tunnel.
Oh, Spetsnaz.
Yes. So it wasn't not a Spetsnaz knife that she was holding, the one that shoots out the blade. Let's get that one clear. Actually, I looked that up on that, and there's some very cool YouTube videos. It's a knife. You sort of, there's a button there. You press it, the blade shoots out. It can, penetrate through a drinks can and come out the other side. Very cool and destructive. It's not that. Let's be clear. It's FSB Lynx 4 tactical knife. It's only the elites got those, and very good for taking out the bad guys in a drainage tunnel at night. I think it's especially it's a knife good for that. Like just like there's certain pens that are good for drawing horses. And did you notice there that they're in their first appearance when they were there, sort of not sneaking up on the Joes, but being relatively unaware to the Joes. They looked somewhat like Rock-On and Stone-Dar from He-Man there as they as they come up from the ground.
I was actually thinking in that panel where they pop up. This is page 1, 2, 3, 4. I was thinking of the Rock Lords from GoBots, and this is in no way a swipe at any of the people who made this fine comic book. This is just if I see someone who is hiding as a rock and they stand up and they have like a stuffed rock on their back, I'm going to think
that's where we're going to go.
That's like that toy that folds and then it's a rock. Back to your point about Hama putting in more women characters. we see this push in a lot of comics publishing in the last 10 years. And I think it's worth spending a moment on, because I have a friend who's female and who draws for Marvel. And I think it was 7 years ago, Marvel was publishing 0 monthly comics with female protagonists. And then a couple books started, like Miss Marvel and The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl and
Ironheart. Is it?
Yeah, and I mean that's jumping even much more recently, but yes, and like 3-4 years later, they were now like
And Captain
10.
Marvel, of course.
Yes, but suddenly they went from 0 to like 10, and that's really important because the readership wants to see itself. Right? Like as a white male, I always see myself in movies and comics and toys. And if I wasn't a white male, right, it's like I knew a girl in high school who loved G.I. Joe. And she thought Scarlet was a badass. And she said that thing that has come up a couple times, I think in the letters page. It's like, well, why did you like G.I. Joe? She said, well, the women were treated the same. Like it's just, if they're just just part of the team, just doing the mission. And I think with more women showing up in the G.I. Joe storyline, it can look, to someone who's cynical about this, and I'm not, it can look like, oh, well, the writer or the publisher are like giving into pressure. They're being politically correct. I don't think it's that at all. I think they are making the book look more like the audience. And like these two women, as soon as I saw them, right, I thought, oh, this is like women in the Israeli Defense Forces. In Israel, this is one of the only armies in the Western world in which women are drafted into the military. Women in Israel have to serve in the military by law, and they're in combat, right? And this was like decades before America's like, can we make women combat soldiers? Like they're weaker, they're not as fast. It's like, can they be firefighters? Can they be football players? Right? It's like enough. Like this argument was over a long time ago. And women wanting to serve in the military, and then like women in the military being visible and inspiring, or just making it seem possible to younger women, like that's something that they might want to do. Like that's going to take a little while, but like we should start to be at the point now where this page where these two women soldiers, these freedom fighters pop up, like we shouldn't be surprised anymore. Like, oh my goodness, out of these two characters that are soldiers, both of them are women. It's like, yep.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad thing or something necessarily we should be surprised by, but it's an observation that that Larry is definitely sort of enjoying and embracing that element of having strong female characters, and has really since that original run and in this one, and particularly the more recent years of this run, really focused in on that part of the cast and continuing to build it out and introduce new characters. I think the first 155 issues, we really we had Scarlet, a little bit of Lady J here and there, Zarana, Baroness, Dr. Burkhart, I suppose, but yeah, not necessarily huge amounts. That's definitely not an exhaustive list, but it feels like it is more of a concerted push in the recent years on this particular book.
Agreed.
So what else? Was there anything else that jumped out for you in this issue?
There's a sound effect on the last page that's too dark, and I can't read it.
All right.
On the first panel of the final page, I think it's Wham. I think it's
good spot.
WHAMM.
Yeah.
And
that threw me. I did not know what that was.
The fill color, I think the fill color is supposed to be yellow, and the outline is, of course, supposed to be black. And it's because there's an explosion. And I feel like this is just a small technical glitch somewhere in the process. I don't think someone would like choose to make that look that way.
I thought it was like planks of wood being thrown by the explosion or something. I couldn't make it out at all.
Yeah, because there's a metal door just above and to the right of it
Yeah.
that is being thrown away from the explosion. My other sort of overall thought about this issue is that comic books used to be 22 pages, and comic books now are 20.
Yeah.
And when DC made the switch, and I want to say it was 2011, but I could be wrong, I noticed it. I would get to the end of the comic and I would think, that felt just a little short. I felt like not one more major thing would happen, but like one more wrinkle to this explanation, or like the epilogue would just get a little more to it. And the analog I have is like, I'm watching a TV show, an hour-long TV show, and without ads, it's like 44 minutes. And then I watch Star Trek, the original series, and without ads, it's like 52 minutes. And so I'm watching a Star Trek episode, and at like minute 39, I start to feel, they need to wrap this up because this is going to be over soon. And with Star Trek, the original series, it's like, no, they're still introducing problems and very casually having these charismatic protagonists like talk about it. Like, what do we do, Spock? It's Captain, something new. Like, oh my God. It's like suddenly there's an act 4 to this story. And with this issue, when I turned from the second to the last page to the final page, and I realized the story was over, I thought, okay, this is one of the cases where I feel that this is shorter than a lot of G.I. Joe stories because it's 20 pages and not 22 pages. And I don't want to say that the ending is rushed. I don't think it is. I think where it cuts off is actually quite dramatic. I think in another universe where this story is 22 pages, there might be like one more scene after this where the Joes remark how like once again they're getting the short end of the stick, or I feel like sort of 2 pages earlier, like when the Joes make it into the base or into the like by the nuclear smokestack, and they see Hans Zucker and Snake Eyes climbs up the scaffolding, and then there's this final showdown with Zara and Hans Zucker and the grenade. I feel like in another universe, that scene would play out with a little more breathing room. So not a bad thing. I certainly want my comics to be longer. I want all 20 pages to be 22, but something that I noticed.
Let's move on to some typical hammerisms as we do Hammer Time.
Stop. Hammer time.
Time to beat the soles of your boots with my face. Sucking chest wounds, red ninjas, brain scanners, rubber oozes, blue ninjas. And then some more sucking chest wounds. Hammer time.
So the hammerisms I noticed were coming thick and fast. We had D-Bus, Charlie Mike, Go South, all on the first 2 pages. Just in terms of the typical Larry Hama-isms for turns of phrases. And then later on in the story, we heard Scarlet talking about that maybe they'll put a copy in the box with your medals in that safe 3 levels down under the Pentagon. Yeah, the poor Joes, they never get to see their medals. They're just stored away in a box somewhere that they can't get to.
Terms didn't jump out at me, but what you already referred to, the Spetsnaz knife, like, no, it's an FSB linked for tactical knife, right? Like spending 1.5 panels of dialogue on this very specific gear.
Yeah.
Strikes me as a Hama-ism, but then it ends up being actually about character and story. It's like, wait, is she violating the Geneva Convention by using this outlawed knife? It's like, well, are we going to stop her? It's like, does she deserve to? And then on the previous page, see that drainage pipe? I see Snake Eyes. He's prying open the grate with the hydraulic jack from the BTR, right? So Snake Eyes has this red cylinder. It looks like a fire extinguisher. And they're in front of a sewer gate. And unlike every movie we've ever seen, this sewer gate is not a wide open circle, right? It looks like Venetian blinds in front of it. There are horizontal metal pieces keeping them from getting in. And Snake Eyes is using this thing to bend the things out of shape so they can get in. And like what I was saying before about there's no comic like this comic, you wouldn't see that in an issue of Punisher. You certainly wouldn't see it in an issue of Avengers.
No.
Right? It's like, no, like Tony Stark is building like Iron Man armor that like circles the earth, right? So they're not going to spend 2 panels on like, how do we get into this sewer?
Very good.
There used to be a pudding that was over-egged. You know the pudding. You know the pudding. At first it was British, but then it was Commonwealth. You know the pudding. You know the pudding. But now there's a new player in town, a comic book writer of some renown. He's using real world examples and peppering the issues with lots of samples. It's a Larry Hammer colloquialism. He's talking G.I. Joe and all its heroism. Can you guess what it is? Is it something new? Now listen as Larry drops a slice of real life on you.
And then colloquialisms. Did you encounter any interesting colloquialisms that are worth highlighting?
No, but I admit I'm new to collecting these as I read, so I'll defer to you.
So the one that I spotted this issue was the turn of phrase, the Israeli burp gun, which of course is referring to Snake Eyes' Uzi. And that phrase, burp gun, is so called because of its high fire rate. The Russian PPSH-41 is the most famous burp gun by the sounds of things. But yeah, it's an interesting turn of phrase and very evocative. And as you say, it's the kind of thing that we won't get in any other comic apart from G.I. Joe. Did you have a particular favorite line of dialogue that stood out?
Favorite line of dialogue.
Right after they've met, the insertion team has met Aman and Zara, and the 2 women are talking about they're subtly referring to how they took out the bad guys that were going to meet and ambush the Joes. Stalker says, "Did you 2 take out the whole squad by yourselves?" And Aman says, "They were overconfident and complacent." Stalker says, "You're tougher than you look." And then Zara says, "When we have to be." And Diaz draws a really nice bit of acting here where Zara's eyebrows are up. She's sort of nodding her head a little bit, and her palm is up and her fingers are splayed. No, right? They're like, the hand gesture you'd make. And it is a small moment of levity in a not quite grim, but a serious story. And it's a nice counterbalance where these 2 women freedom fighters who are like upset about Scoop and are like out for revenge and are like probably upset that they have to rely on some Americans to help them, but glad for the assistance. It's not a joke, but it reads a little bit like a punchline. But it's also at the same time a calm and cool admission that they're excellent at what they do, and what they do is not very nice. So I think it's a line that speaks volumes.
Maybe a little bit flirtatious as well. I'm not sure. Do you think?
Possible.
Yeah, I think I had the same character later on in the book was possibly my favorite line, or one, not a line that we've not mentioned before anyway, which was once they find out about Zara's motivations, that Stalker, is a little bit agitated, as you might expect, and says, "What? You should have told us." And there's the reply, "Who am I to deny her righteous retribution?" Larry's got a good turn of phrase. I like it.
I just want to pop out for a second and encourage everyone who's listening to this. If you get your G.I. Joe jollies from listening to Mark and friends talk about the comic, but you don't buy and read the comic, buy and read this comic.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, I would hope that most of our listeners are reading as we're going along and able to sort of add some extra depth, because our description of the comic will always be a shadow of actually the reading the thing and enjoying the detail of the story and the art itself. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't enjoy reading it and discussing it. So yeah, please do.
Who is the MVP? Most valuable person in these issues? Who is the MVP? Is it a Cobra Joe or the enemy?
So we've got MVP, most valuable player in these issues. Who was your favorite character? Did anyone stick out?
Zara. It's an attribute of this series that it is some of the characters who only show up for just one issue that are the most memorable. Sometimes because they are killed or they sacrifice themselves, and maybe we don't come in with any baggage. I see Scoop and I want him to be an excellent videographer, but also get a chance to do something cool in combat and to prove to all the other fans who think that he's lame that he's not lame, right? And that expectation bogs me down because there are 10 characters in this comic, and that's a lot to ask. But Zara has this tragic backstory. It's a reveal late in the book. Early on, we establish that she and her fellow fighter are badasses. She speaks 2 languages, right? She sacrifices herself. Zara.
Yep. With you all the way on that one. It's it's the standout for sure. And poor old Scoop, maybe partly his inclusion there was to be the kind of the weak link in the chain, because one of the main things that does happen with him is that he's the one who is overpowered and gets his gun grabbed off of him. So poor old Scoop. I don't think he was necessarily the most combat ready of all of the G.I. Joes on this one, but.
I will hope for maybe there'll be a run of issues after 300 with some self-contained stories, and maybe Scoop can show up again and be the hero and the expert of another G.I. Joe story. When that happened, when he gets his gun grabbed off him, I thought, oh man, poor Scoop. Does Larry have something against Scoop? But what I remind myself with these characters is that they are all the Joes are the best of the best of the best.
Yeah.
And so realistically, very few of them would make mistakes. I know things go wrong on missions, but at the same time, if all of them are perfect, there's no drama in the story. So occasionally someone's going to have to make a mistake, and it should mean something. And I don't know that it should, if Snake Eyes made a mistake, someone might say, well, Snake Eyes never makes a mistake. Or someone would say, yeah, but Snake Eyes does so many cool things, this is okay. And Scoop has only ever had opportunity to do 5 or 6 things. Yeah. So now a larger percentage of his, quote, on-screen G.I. Joe performance is this mistake. But it this mistake also drives the final drama of the story.
Yeah, and when you've got a team of 4 of Larry's favorite characters who are all ultra tough badasses plus Scoop, it's a bit harsh on Scoop, I would say. Just before we do our rating, our Joeage, one interesting thing there was actually that in the letters page, Larry gave a shout out and said that I've been feeling re-energized lately, and the Untold Tales arc is sparking my imaginations. Which I think it's sort of slight undertone of that is possibly that previously he was not quite as energized and maybe lacking in imaginative sparks a little bit. But yeah, good to hear that it's getting his imagination and sparks flying. Very good.
I think it's also worth noting that much of Snake Hunt was written and drawn during COVID, particularly the lockdown. And, this affects everything. Every creative endeavor. I was teaching during the lockdown, and besides the fact that it was harder because I had to move my teaching remotely and my students were all accessing these lessons on their computer, we weren't in the same room together. It's okay if everyone's a little depressed for some of 2020, because the world just got a lot harder.
Mm.
And so, when I am being a cranky comic book reader, like my favorite artist did 5 issues in a row of this comic and then they missed half an issue. What's their problem, right? It's like, well, maybe they got the flu, or maybe their like mom died and they like had to take a week off, or maybe they deserved a vacation and the editor had forgotten to line up someone else. Maybe it's not the artist's fault. So I do also perhaps read into your observation here that not just that Larry's excited about Untold Tales, maybe Larry was a little less excited about Snake Hunt, but also I'm going to give a lot of creatives a little extra leeway of the last year. Like was it hard to write Snake Hunt when like you didn't know if your publisher was going to go out of business because for 2 months they couldn't publish anything because the distributor stopped distributing comics, and so the stores couldn't sell new comics? Like that might affect, this is not the best parallel, but I don't love Frank Miller's Dark Knight Strikes Again, his sequel to The Dark Knight Returns. But that story changed drastically halfway through because he had already written and drawn the first half of it, and then September 11th happened, and it became a very different story. So I don't know that Snake Hunt changed in any way that we could notice, because making it changed, the editor was already going to be getting like digital files and email with the writer and the artists, right? It's not like they were all working in the same room together and then they couldn't. That wasn't what the change was. But, it's suddenly in March, April, May, June of 2020, you got to worry about going out to buy groceries.
Actually, in the Robert Atkins interview I did with him, he talked about some of that creative process, and it was literally almost halfway into Snake Hunt when IDW gave the pens down order, and they that was it. He wasn't allowed to do any more work, and he didn't have a script to work from, and none was forthcoming. So all of that time wasn't able to be used as a sort of a creative time and ability to act as a buffer to do some of that work. So they, when they were told they could start working again, it was right up against the deadlines, unfortunately. But So Larry would have been still mid writing in that stage. So that second part of Snake Hunt would have been written in a post-COVID world.
Right.
Interesting. Should we talk about toys?
Yes.
Mark talks about toys, ho ho. He talks about G.I. Joe. He talks about all the toys from the comic book and the animated show. Mark talks about toys. Mark talks about toys.
So, have you chosen a toy to talk about? Shall I guess?
Well, my co-host was hoping I would pick Scoop, so I picked Scoop.
Shh, don't tell them. Did you pick Scoop?
I did.
Yeah, I guessed right. So, what can you tell me about Scoop?
Scoop is sculpted in the likeness of an NBC news reporter, right?
Ah.
Scoop is a real person. This is, a lot of the early G.I. Joe figures, first couple years, aren't real people. A few of them are. And then midway through the toy line, most of them became likenesses of people at Hasbro. Scoop is in the likeness of an NBC News reporter who had done some favorable coverage of Hasbro for the Today Show. And so if you're looking at the figure and you're thinking, this sort of looks like someone, it's like they're like making a face as opposed to, I don't know, like
there's like a distinct expression there, isn't there?
Yeah, like Roadblock version 1, like that's just anyone. That's just that face doesn't. Anyway, so I was immediately struck when I saw Scoop for sale because he comes with a lot of stuff, and that was 89, like 88, 89. The Joes, to my eye, started to come with a lot more stuff. So you're getting more bang for your buck, and I don't think I would have loved the character had he not gotten such a prominent role in Operation Dragonfire, the first 5 Deke episodes that ran in September of '89. And he's used to great effect there, both as a sort of character in the conflict and also as a reporter. The yellow and the green for me have always been a little too bright, but he has a cool helmet which takes some of the edge off. And in 1989, I was making movies with a video camera with friends at school, and so the fact that a Joe comes with a video camera was a neat parallel.
Very good. Yeah, so that's interesting stuff. I was just looking up on the details there, and actually see on Yojo it talks about the fact that for Scoop it was NBC television news reporter Mike Leonard who was used to model the figure after, and the character of the Scoop was given the real name Leonard Michaels. So sort of switching around surname and first name. So that's quite cool. Let's have a look at this guy. So he's from Chicago, Illinois. He's a journalist. He's a microwave transmission specialist as a secondary specialty. Interesting. It takes a special kind of guy to step out from behind cover during a firefight and keep his finger squeezing the trigger of his video cam. With an advanced degree in journalism, as well as a master's degree in electrical engineering, Scoop could have had a secure future with a network news team. Instead, he opted for service on the G.I. Joe team because he wanted to be on the spot when news was being made, not reporting the aftermath. The other G.I. Joes were a bit put off by Scoop at first. They resented having a third wheel tagging along, lugging 60 pounds of video equipment and not much firepower. They changed their minds after he carried a wounded comrade 2 clicks to an extremely hairy evacuation site for a medevac, all the while his camera captured the whole thing on tape. Now that's called doing your job and then some. And actually, sort of looking at this guy as we're talking, thinking about him, he's probably kind of in the scrap pile in terms of a speciality, because I guess in this modern era with camera technology being that much smaller, it's common practice now for military personnel and police personnel and so on to have body cams, on their helmet or on their torso somewhere, where it's sort of filming as they go. So possibly that role of a dedicated on-the-spot video man with his 60 pounds of equipment, is a little bit redundant. Oh dear.
I can imagine not knowing how modern military missions are fully recorded. I can imagine. So yes, you'd have a body cam on everyone on a mission. I can imagine still wanting to have an expert photographer or journalist who might have more than one camera on their person, or it might be a very, very small smartphone type camera, like in one hand, who's going to choose to get better compositions than all these cameras that are just on some guy's shoulder.
Yeah, frame the shot.
Yeah, or someone who, because he's a photojournalist or some kind of reporter, has a different angle, has a different point of view on sort of who to talk to or what questions to ask, or sort of where to stand aside when the more active military people are engaging in the mission. But in terms of, this giant backpack that he has, and your comment that he might not have much of a job to do on G.I. Joe in 2020, again, I feel like there's this sliding scale, like Gung Ho doesn't have a shirt. And in G.I. Joe, they used to talk about Vietnam, and now they talk about like the Southeast Asian conflict.
Yep.
And it's like that Simpsons line where Lisa observes to Bart that sort of once a week their lives get crazy, and then things sort of reset, and then a week later it happens again.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there we go. But Scoop, he's a nice guy. He's I think I've got a somewhat of affection for this guy, despite all of the things that might ordinarily sort of put me make make me somewhat less of a favorite. He's crazy gaudy, but somehow it works.
Imagine if our first exposure to this character had been the story of that anecdote from the dossier. If before we saw the toy, we read a story where he carried a wounded Joe 2 kilometers and still videotaped the whole thing, right? Scoop would all be our second favorite character.
Yeah, already going in with a bit of love for him. I get it. Good stuff. And not only have you picked in inverted commas the one that I've told you to pick, but not only have you picked the character for the toy, but you've also looked out for some primo licensing merchandise.
You know, G.I. Joe ain't just toys, funny books, and tunes. Those guys will license anything. So funky, so nice, G.I. Joe merchandise. Do you need it? Sure you do. It's G.I. Joe branded, fool. What shall we make? We can't decide. Pick some old crap and put Flint's face on the side. On the side. T-shirts, funkers, sticker shampoo, lunchbox soap, jackets, underoos. Yeah, that's right. I said underoos. Badges, brushes, combs and mugs, telephones, tissues, and probably hugs. Hot damn, G.I. Joe hugs? Radios, candy, tents, tattoos, with a G.I. Joe logo they just can't lose. Door knocker, doorbell, even doormat, they'll probably brand your dog and your cat. So funky, so nice, it's G.I. Joe merchandise. Do you need it? Sure you do, it's G.I. Joe branded, fool. What shall we make? We can't decide. Pick some old crap and put Flint's face on the side. It's G.I. Joe merchandise.
Yeah, this sound that you hear, this is the sound of a G.I. Joe mini viewer. There were 6 of them. They were released in 2004 by Tomy, and when they're about the size, they're if you had a very, very large hand, they're about the size of half of your thumb. And they were released in vending machines, and it's basically a miniature Viewmaster. So there's a button, and you push it down with your index finger, and you hold your eye up to the tiny viewfinder, and inside you see one of 6 comic adventures. These were the pack-in comics that came in the 2004 G.I. Joe toy line. They were written by Larry Hama. The artists, I think, were not credited, and I think these comics were the back of the cross-sell, the fold-out catalog for the year. Sort of like a weird format for the comic, because it's kind of like a fold-out poster, the type of thing that would have come and maybe highlighted some figures and stuff previously, but it's got kind of a comic strip on it instead. So each of these has a keychain, so you can hang this little supermarket or toy store vending machine toy on your key ring. I love this for several reasons. One, Viewmasters, right? And for those of you, I hope you all know, right? It's this toy from decades ago where you hold it up to both eyes and you put in a disc, and there are tiny pieces of film on a circle, and you click the button and it rotates it, and you see in binocular vision a scene. And some of them in the, I think it's
almost 3D because of that binocular vision effect. I actually had the a Viewmaster, and I had the G.I. Joe story Hot Potato with it.
Okay, so I wanted to ask, it was images from the comic, not from the show?
This was specifically the story Hot Potato, which appeared as the backup story in issue 1 of G.I. Joe.
Right. Often not reprinted, IDW. And there were G.I. Joe Viewmaster reels for Adventure Team in the 70s. And when it's photography, when it's like three-dimensional, like Snoopy or Flintstones characters in a little diorama, that is binocular. And when it's a flat image, the effect is a little bit less. So this so the one I'm specifically looking at is Bombs Bursting in Air, which I think was the first comic for that run, because I think they're numbered like part 1, part 2, or they say to be continued. 2004, the G.I. Joe toy line, I don't have a lot of knowledge about, because that was when I was paying less attention, right? Spy Troops and Valor versus Venom, and that transition time leading up to 2007. But I like the comic because it's written by Larry Hama. The artwork is nice, but it's that style where everyone looks very, very young. But the effect that you get when it's printed not on paper, but on transparent plastic, and you hold it up to a window or a light, the images are backlit. And so it's much more like looking at a slideshow, looking at a movie, looking at a TV show, where it glows. And the color schemes, it's not Technicolor, right? It is absolutely not Technicolor, but the palette leans a little bit more towards that because it is film and not ink on paper. And the comic has the word balloons and the sound effects stripped. So let's see. All right, so the first one is a plane coming at us, some cool 2004 G.I. Joe jet, and then inside we see Duke and someone piloting the plane, and then we see a black plane coming after them, or they're chasing it. It's probably Cobra, and then Duke has jumped to the Cobra plane from the Joe plane with its cockpit open. Oh, he has an American flag tattoo on his bicep. And then we see Cobra Commander and the Baroness inside a cockpit, and he's shaking his fists. And then he's pointing down at Duke, who's just gotten on board, and we see the Joe plane flying away. And then the two of them are fighting on a missile, I guess in the launch bay. And then Cobra Commander kicks Duke, and there's a really gorgeous purple background. And then the missile launches, Duke falls off, Cobra Commander is not in the way of the blast. And then this one actually has two panels. Duke, you can't see it, I think it's cropped, but I think he's got a parachute, and he's firing a pistol, and it's hitting the missile. And then in the final panel, we're on the ground, Joe's holding a flag, 4 Joes are saluting, and there's an explosion in the air, and Duke is parachuting in front of all 5 of these Joes, and there's Joe base behind them, and there's a helicopter on top of the base. And then there's a final panel that says, "The end." Baroness is looking at Cobra Commander, and he's shaking his fist.
Very good.
I love it. The other reason why I love this is that in my history of animation class, on the first day of class, we talk about optical devices and toys that predate film. So things before 1895, like zoetropes and phenakistoscopes. And even though this specific object is from 2004, it is trading in that kind of optical phenomenon where you are telling a story through images, and it's not yet like moving film, like one frame at a time. So this specific object I bring into my class the first day, along with a bunch of other show and tell objects, and I pass them around, and I have pieces of film, 16 millimeter film, and 35 millimeter film, and 70 millimeter film, and this is one of the things I pass around. So it is both a fun G.I. Joe bit of merch. It is also a teaching tool.
Excellent, because every day is a school day, and more than anything else, it just looks so darn cute. Just look at it. It's so dinky.
Yeah, I guess looking at Yo Joe, the others are Ninja Showdown, Spy Troops, Roadblock Gets Heavy, Tanks for Nothing, and Face to Face. And I should probably get the other 5.
It sounds like you'll bring a lot of joy. Brilliant. Thanks for that one. That one had never been on my radar. I was not aware of that one before you showed it. So that is great. And now let's turn to my brand new feature, and you are going to be the guinea pig unveiling it upon the world.
Excellent.
This is how the story goes. Attention. At this moment, you are now listening to
Talking innuendo.
If you are offended by words like
Sucking, flesh wound. Willy, Pete. Balls, crystal balls. Hypno shield.
whatever, take the tape out now. This is not a pop album. And by the way, suck my
Grandmother's
mother...
brick in a Prada handbag.
So this new segment is called INUEN-JOE. And basically, if you're in the right frame of mind or the wrong frame of mind, or specifically my frame of mind, most of the G.I. Joe names just sound pretty dirty. So, you wonder, as they were filling out their code, their HR record with their new code name in that box that goes there, you wonder whether they thought, do I want to saddle myself with this name maybe, or do I want to think about it again? So yeah, it's voyage into my mind and what makes me laugh and tick. So my challenge is, can I get through a list of 10 dirty sounding G.I. Joe names without making my co-host, aka you, titter? That's right, titter. And that's an indicator of the kind of level of maturity of this segment.
Should I warn you or our listeners ahead of time that I take G.I. Joe very seriously?
So it might be that you're not the most receptive audience for this, but we'll see. Are you steeled for it? Do you think you can cope?
I want to play along, and I don't want to be a spoil sport, so I'm ready.
Okay. Skid mark. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I want to get closer to a guffaw before we stop on this.
Wasn't Skidmark also an Autobot? I think he was.
Yeah, I think he might have been.
I think in Generation 2.
And in the UK it was, I think, renamed Treadmark, because in the UK it just means soiled grundies.
Smart.
I would say.
Smart.
Okay, so Skidmark, Blowtorch, Snow Job, and can you imagine if Snow Job and Blowtorch got married and Blowtorch had to take Snow Job's last name?
I would read that story.
Backblast, Big Lob, Beachhead, Hardmaster, Softmaster, ooh, unfortunate, Night Creeper, Big Boa. Oh, I think I got through all 10 without too much more than the level of a titter. It didn't feel like there was a guffaw there, unfortunately. But
if you had done it in the opposite order, I think if you'd built up to Skidmark, because so Snow Job, I have steeled myself against, and I think once or twice online, I have wagged my finger at sort of lazy non-G.I. Joe fans who are like, "Ha ha, Snow Job." It's like, no, that's a military term, you jerk. Like, don't insult my toy. Whereas I think Skidmark showed up when I knew what it was. Whereas all these other names, my first exposure to them was like, no, this is a serious G.I. Joe guy.
Mm.
And Skidmark, I think so he's the driver for the wonderful Desert Fox. My brother had that, so that figure was sort of nicely off limits for me. Generally, he played with his toys and I played with mine, though we played with them together. But we had this sense of ownership. And like a lot of vehicle drivers, we didn't really have a personality. And like a lot of vehicle drivers that year, there's a lot of green and orange.
Yeah,
so,
a lot of orange.
So he didn't get left out of games, but he's just sort of stuck in the driver's seat of the Desert Fox. But I think as an Autobot, right? Like
You'd
the
probably be
moment
embarrassed to stand up just in case what people spot as well, right?
I didn't realize the thing about Treadmark. That's such a nice fix for the problem. But as an Autobot, I think the moment I saw that name, I thought that's too bad. So these other ones, I don't want to say I came prepared to not guffaw, but I take G.I. Joe very seriously.
Okay, I've got a few more on my list, so maybe next time I'll be able to get one past you.
I do like INUEN-JOE. That's great.
I was pleased with that. Okay, so next time on the ARAH read-through, we will be moving up one issue and we will be on the second part of Untold Tales in issue 277. So read that ahead of the issue. That is a Law and Order special, I believe, with Brian Shearer on the art chores. But next time, we will be moving into a new era of G.I. Joe as well. So we will be, Tim will be joining us, and we'll have a new special co-host as well. We will be looking at the Devil's Due era of the comics. So we will be reading the first few issues of that. I don't know if we'll cover 1 and 2, or maybe the first arc, which is 1 through 4. So if you read all 4, you'll be ready and you'll know what's going on, because knowing, as we say, is half the battle. So, and we've also got a bonus episode of all jingles, which may have already dropped at the point that this comes out. You can find us in all the usual places. Talking Joe, a G.I. Joe podcast on Facebook, Talking_Joe on Twitter, Talking Joe Comics, all one word, on Instagram, and Talking Joe Comics, all one word, at gmail.com. Where can people find you, Tim?
arealamericanbook.com, facebook.com/arealamericanbook, Instagram, A Real American Book.
It's nothing if not consistent.
I just want to thank Mark for inviting me in, not inviting me back, but also inviting me in. Being co-host is quite an honor, and I'm excited. And also thank you to the listeners who are getting used to a different feel to the show. Chief was great, and I wish him well, and I'm really glad to be part of this now, so thank you all.
Excellent. It's nice to have you on board. I'm delighted, I think it's fair to say. And we will see you next time. But for now, when all is said and done, you can catch us down the road.
Because we've been talking Joe.
And we're all out of Joes. Laters.
Bye.